Hello and welcome. A woman's right to have it all, success in the workplace while raising a family at home, has been the cornerstone of the feminist movement. But now that so many women are thought to have it all, what happens to mothers who opt out of the workforce in favour of staying at home? Is staying home really a choice, or do chores and child rearing still keep women from succeeding at work? On this show we talk to two mothers with very different perspectives about the choices mothers make and why they make them. We decided on this topic in response to suggestions from you, our viewers. And don't forget, we take your questions and comments on this program via phone and mobile text. The numbers are there on your screen. Well, joining me for this discussion from New York is Linda Hirschman, a mother and attorney who, in her latest book, discusses the dilemma many mothers face, arguing they should pursue careers. Get to work and get a life before it's too late, argues that women continue to be held back in the workplace by chores and child rearing. Also with us is Leslie Morgensteiner, who's also a mother. She blogs on the subject of working motherhood for the Washington Post and edited Mommy Wars, a collection of essays by mothers about the choices they have made. Welcome to the both of you to the show.
Thank you, Riz.
Thank you.
Thanks. Linda, we'll get to you in a second, but Leslie, I want to start off with you and just ask you about this phrase, Mommy Wars, the title of your book. Where does that come from?
Well, what it means to a lot of women is the tension between working and stay-at-home moms, and that each side is sort of jealous of the other's choices and questioning sort of a moral superiority, that I am better because I work or I'm better because I stay at home. But it really is that there's a war inside each mom's head. As all of us, myself and Linda included, we face our own struggles about what is right for us and our children and our families.
Now, I know that you believe that women have an insecurity, an inherent insecurity about the choice they have to make between work and family. What do you think is at the root of that insecurity?
Well, I think that naturally you want to be the best mother that you can be. Dads feel this way too. They want to be the best parent they can be. But in our culture, as in a lot of cultures, we really worship motherhood and say it's the most important thing that a woman can do in her life. You hear that all the time throughout your life as a girl and as a woman. And so when you have kids, you feel tremendous pressure from our society to be a perfect mother. And there are also a lot of other pressures too, to provide for your family. You may have invested a lot in your education, and so you feel like you need to fulfill that promise. And it adds up to what I call the inner mommy war.
Now, Linda Hirschman, I want to get you in. You're in the media a lot as well on this subject, and you've been described as a feminist flamethrower for what many people are outraged when you say that the domestic environment is basically inferior to the working environment. And I wonder to what extent you take that approach to fan the flames of debate, so to speak.
Well, we have had 20 backlash years of messages like what Leslie just described, telling women that they have to be perfect mothers and that motherhood is the most important job a woman can have, where you never, ever hear that fatherhood is the most important job that a man can have. So a part of my agenda was to be a different voice and to say, just a minute here, just because these are the messages we've been hearing for all these years does not make them right. Let's examine what that means, and why is it that the burden of child rearing, children having both mothers and fathers, is placed so heavily on the women, and that they have to sacrifice their worldly ambitions to do it.
And of course, you're very forceful, or fairly forceful, about this idea that women should get out and work, and your book even reflects that in the title, Get to Work. Now, do you believe that women should, or even could be, able to make this kind of choice without being judged?
I think that different situations call out different judgments. The women that I interviewed and was mostly talking about are well-educated women with enough financial security so that they have a real choice in the matter. Most women and men in the United States in the current economy don't have much choice in the matter. So I'm judging the people who have enough money and enough education to have some choice in the matter. And I do believe that that their decisions should be judged. Obviously, I wouldn't put them in jail for it, but I'm not the government. But from a moral and a philosophical and a social standpoint, then I think that decision is just like any other decision in life, and is worthy of being judged.
Let me, on this subject of judgment, bring you back in here, Leslie, and ask you about the role of the media, because of course expectations, aspirations, all this, a lot of this is shaped by what we see and read. I mean, magazines, there's been a huge growth in women's and men's magazines. How much does the media play a big part in this?
I think it's a huge role, and I'm not suggesting that the media necessarily has an agenda. They're just reflecting this fierce debate among so many women in the United States, and among men too. But what happens, one reason that I wrote Mommy Wars and had, Mommy Wars is a collection of 26 moms weighing in about their own experience and their own voices. And I needed to write that book because I was so tired of hearing the media take on these issues. Because if you listen to the media, what the message is always that moms, not dads, just moms are doing something wrong. You're either breastfeeding for too long or not long enough. Your kids are too scheduled with sports activities, or they're too fat. They're on the internet too much, or they're not technology savvy. And all this seems to add up to, we're all failing. All moms are failing.
Was there a common thread between those 26 women that you found?
That nobody was perfectly happy, and that motherhood is much harder than most women expected, that there's a lot more anger involved in motherhood than our society is willing to accept. And also, one of the interesting things about Mommy Wars is that most women did not write at all about their husbands, because fathers have been so excused from child rearing and from the debate. And that is really starting to change, but not fast enough for the moms in Mommy Wars.
Well, it was interesting. There was a survey done asking whether working mums are good for society or not, and done here in the US. And Linda Hirschman, as we quote these figures, 41% said it was a bad thing. 32% were indifferent to it, no difference, and 22%, only 22% thought it was a good thing for society. Are you surprised at that kind of response?
I'm really not, because I think that we had, 10 years of feminism and 40 years of backlash. So the resistance to women achieving their full place in society has been fierce.
What about the way that men approach it, though? Do you think men are, we've been discussing that men haven't really been discussed in this. Do you think that men are in the debate enough, Linda?
I think that women are enablers by taking on the burden of raising the children themselves. What Leslie just described is absolutely what I believe and found as well. By taking the burden of all of the child rearing onto themselves, they excuse the fathers and husbands from pulling their weight in the family, and so they live in an unjust family. I don't think that men are either heroes or villains, but I do know that, as the philosopher Thomas Hobbes said, people think above all of their own good. So until women stand up and demand that the men in the family pull their weight, I don't think that the men are going to volunteer for it.
I think, Leslie, you want to respond to this? You look like...
Well, I think just the idea that women have unlimited choice, that you can just come home one day and say, Riz, I want you to do all of the laundry from now on. That's a really, it's a ridiculous concept. I'm so glad you do, and you can come to my house anytime. But I think that women get blamed a lot, as Linda is sort of blaming them now. It's not that women wake up and say, you know what, I want to work full time, and I want to do all the laundry and all the grocery shopping and stay up all night with a sick child. Our society really pressures women to do everything, and men and our government and our companies do very, very little to support women once they become moms, even though we tell moms all the time it's such an important thing to do.
Interestingly enough, it's a big debate apart from, Mommy Wars, Get to Work. There's another book that on this issue of opting out, and I just want to quote from it. Pamela Stone, who authored Opting Out, said, "Opting out makes the decision seem kind of light. It has the potential to do harm by reinforcing the idea that women aren't interested in work, that careers are disposable and ephemeral. It also lets employers off the hook." And I wonder, Linda, here at this point, to what extent do you feel that the lack of, women obviously have made progress largely in the workforce, but the sort of lack of positions in certain areas, certainly in political and legal sort of judicial positions that might change the environment, the working environment for women, how much do you think that's to blame for how much of a choice women can make when it comes to work?
Well, I would never dream of saying that a woman should roll over one day and assert that her husband should do the laundry. My book starts when the people are in college, and I say you have to take your education very seriously and pre-commit yourself to a life of good work and remunerative work so that you can be independent, and that you should make it clear when you're courting and before you select a mate, and certainly before you have a baby with a man, that you are committed to your place of work so that you never wind up in a situation where it's a change that you demand justice in your own family, but rather the bargain gets made from the beginning that you're going to be expecting to be treated justly. And I think that would go a long way. There is tremendous discrimination against women in the workplace. Catalyst, the women's executive group, just issued the 400 millionth report in the last 25 years, documenting it for the 100 millionth time. There's no question about that. It's harder. So women face both the pull of the culture toward motherhood and the fact that they have to do many things backwards and in high heels, as they said about Ginger Rogers. But I think that this is a heroic opportunity for women, and that we need to seize it and to do the very hard task of making a just family and a just workplace.
Okay, I know, Leslie, you want to respond, but I just want to get an email to Linda first. Now, one to you as well. They came in from viewers. Linda Hirschman, I'll put this to you first. This one came from Kamar, who says his mother is a psychologist and his wife and sister are both doctors. And Kamar writes in from Essex in the United Kingdom, saying, the need for this debate shows how little society has made of the job of mothers. Napoleon said, give me good mothers and I will give you a good nation. Society should pay mothers for looking after tomorrow's society builders. And I wonder how you respond to that idea.
I would say that women are human beings and that we are capable of doing many things, of which raising soldiers for Napoleon's army is just one example. We are capable of discovering radiation. We are capable of healing sick people and taking care of dying people in India. We are capable of running for the President of the United States. So the last thing that I would do would be to limit women to the role of motherhood.
Okay, an email that came in, and I put this to you, Leslie. This came in from Zahira in Kentucky, who says she stopped working about 5 years ago to stay at home. Zahira says, children belong to both parents who share responsibility for them, not the teacher or babysitter. If work drowns out the relationship between mum and dad, those difficulties carry over to the child. If there's no balance, everything malfunctions, including the job, which is modern-day slavery.
Well, there's quite a lot packed in there. You know, it's funny because the subject of my WashingtonPost.com column today is, which is called On Balance, is who comes first, your spouse or your children? And it's sort of what she's alluding to, that you need to have a good marriage in order to provide for a good example for your children and have that kind of stability. And that's a whole different subject, and I think women experience a lot of pressure in that area too. The thing I would say to the person who has sent in the email, and also to Linda and anybody listening, is that childcare is work. It happens to not be paid in this country, but it is work, as anybody who has done it knows, and it is very hard work. And I think one solution, which I hope the woman from Kentucky can take advantage of, is that there is nothing wrong with staying home for a couple of years and then going back to work. Women, especially in the United States, are living a very long time now, and you could stay home for 10 or more years with your kids and still have a very lucrative, professionally rewarding career.
I learned my lesson early when I was at the BBC years ago at a radio station, when a caller came in and the male host said, are you a mother or do you work? Which caused huge outrage. Now, what I wonder, Leslie, is if you had written international mummy wars and looked at women from around the world, taking into account how different the environment might be in the developing world, in cultures where there aren't the same kind of choices, how different that book might have been.
Oh, I think it would be totally, totally different. I think that the culture that a woman lives in prescribes so much of what her choices are and what the debate in her own mind is. And I think every country has a slightly different culture when it comes to motherhood, and a slightly different degree of acceptance of whether a woman can or should work. And the truth is that most women around the world do both. They work and raise children, and there isn't any choice about it. And I think that in some ways this is a very high level problem, that women, when they get to this degree where they have a choice, a true choice, that they could never work again and not worry economically, then that's when for some women the debate gets the most intense, because then they really feel the choice has burdens. And I happen to think they are good burdens, and that women are capable of making decisions, but it makes the voices in their head particularly loud.
Well, I wonder with this, Linda Hirschman, this idea of how cultural influences really affect, your argument for women having to get out there. I mean, obviously some women don't have a choice, so is there a need to really look at what the kind of women we're talking about, the level in society, because even in the developed world there's an issue among the poorer people. How much does that factor into your argument?
The people who live in a situation of extreme scarcity, if they're very poor, or if their culture is very hostile to female autonomy, That raises a whole different set of questions than the people that I was talking about. We are the heirs of many centuries of successive emancipation from slavery, women's literacy. Many layers went into putting the women in a position where they have a true choice. And Leslie is quite correct. In that rarefied environment, the presence of choice raises all kinds of moral issues, which I think it's really important to address. I would never have the effrontery to say to someone who was looking at no water or working or starving or their children starving that I would judge their decision making. That's a very different situation. And living in a culture in England or in the United States where there's a long history of women's emancipation, it's a very different issue than if you live in a culture without it. On the other hand, I believe that all women are human beings and that ultimately they would be entitled to the same kind of opportunities and choices that American women have been lucky enough to have.
Linda, quick question. I mean, from a lot of the women I know, and it's something I see as a growing trend. I think it's maybe established as a growing trend. A lot of women are so concerned with their careers and in making sure they establish at least some degree of, achievement in their careers that they leave the whole family, child rearing, having babies to such a late degree that, again, that in itself causes tensions. And I wonder how you answer the critics who say that traditional role of, women being the homemaker and the, men being the sort of breadwinner, actually worked in a much more sort of harmonious way.
Well, I mean, slavery was probably a relatively peaceful and harmonious system as well. So I would say the fact that, and tyranny certainly is one of the quietest and most peaceful imaginable political societies, but that's not a reason to choose it. When people seek to realize their full human potential, it causes conflict, because man seeks above all things his own good, and the people who have all the stuff don't want to share it so easily. Right. So I would be very, very worried about someone telling me that women shouldn't be uppity because it's so disruptive.
15 seconds left really here, Leslie. Just for a final thought on this, is this a debate that's really going to find an easy answer?
No, I think there's a fundamental conflict between women wanting to be in two places at once. They want to be with their kids, and they want to work and provide for their children and themselves in that way. So I think the mommy wars will keep raging.
I have to thank you, and Linda Hirschman as well. Thank you very much for joining us on this debate. I know it's something we'll touch on again. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Riz.
Pleasure. Thank you for being with us as well. As we celebrate 1 year of Al Jazeera Next English, we look back at some of the fascinating guests we've had on the Riz Khan Show during the past 12 months. Join us for that. Emails go to riz@aljazeera.net. We'll see you next time. Street Talk is next.